Hey, what's up, everyone? I am Joe Bender from the marketing team at DIMO, and I'm here today with Yevgeny Khessin for, just some DIMO dialogue, casual chats about the auto industry, Web3, DIMO Mobile, and Yevgeny's history as well. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Joe. Always a pleasure.
So I'm in the New York office, and we have a couple Web3 people here. And I also love that we have the office in Ann Arbor, in the hub of Detroit and the auto industry. And it has so much history and decades and a century of automotive history over there. So I'm curious about your career a bit, and I know you spent some time at various automakers and in the auto industry, and how that has kind of informed your work here at DEMO and what we do, what perspective you bring to our team. So tell me a little bit about your time in Detroit and at the various companies you worked at.
Absolutely. So it actually started even before coming to Detroit. I was originally born in Ukraine, and from the time I was 9 years old, I always loved cars. Always been a passion of mine. Loved Gran Turismo, loved racing games.
Oh, the music in Gran Turismo, absolutely.
And after graduating, I declined a job offer at Google because I wanted to go join the auto industry. I was very optimistic about its future and what transportation can bring for humanity. So out of school, I went to work at GM and OnStar. That was the 2010s, the kind of the early days of connectivity still. At the time, we were still sending text messages to cars for commands and data. Sounds kind of crazy, but that was almost 15 years ago. And I got to work on some very exciting early stage projects, everything from EV charging for the first Volt to the migration onto data packet based communication with 4G, and a few other interesting projects like the GM recall for the ignition switch that some people might remember. Um, so after spending a few years there, I decided to expand my horizons a bit, and but not go too far away, and went to go work at AT&T on the other side of the equation. And after spending a year there working on basically the deployment models and monitoring of the cell towers, to starting a consulting company in Detroit working with Ford. At the time, they were starting their new mobility initiative and had invested in Argo AI, which is a self-driving car company, and started working with Autonomic, which was a data platform for being able to connect more vehicles to the web. That was a very exciting time in the auto space. A lot of investment across the board, and everyone was trying to chase Uber and Lyft as they were growing. But after launching the Argo AI fleet in Miami and in Austin, I ended up moving into a different role at Volkswagen. So Volkswagen, they were already using Verizon for their telematics, and I had joined as a product line architect for their migration to a company called Eris, which was a mobility services provider based out of California. And there we basically connected around a few million vehicles onto the new platform and rebuilt the mobile app and a few new features that came out of it, especially for the EV space. But in summary, it's 10 years of automotive, 10 years of trying to make transportation more efficient and bring more value to drivers.
Wow, yeah, it's kind of rare that you've been in the auto industry for so long, but always part of that like connected car and like kind of the V2 of transportation where things are a bit more smart and IoT and enabled. And I remember growing up and seeing those OnStar commercials that were just like a black screen, and then it's the audio recording of someone like, I'm trapped in a ditch, like, come help me. And it was kind of that aha moment for so many people of like, oh, my car doesn't need to be completely cut off from the rest of the world. Like, I can use these services to save my life or get me help when I really need it.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And I mean, one thing I want to add, I've always believed that there's two things that really advance humanity forward, and it's communication and transportation. Obviously, with the advent of the internet, it's now possible for me to find out within 5 seconds of anything that's happening globally and chat with my family remotely and chat with my friends remotely and schedule things remotely. But I truly believe that the next step in improving humanity's efficiency is in transportation. And I see the next step in connecting not just people, but things that move people around to be more efficient as well. And honestly, any improvement, even 1% in logistics, in stoplight efficiency, in safety, all this 1% is going to have a huge impact on how we get around, how quickly things come to you, how safe you and your family are on the road. So I'm very passionate about this space.
Yeah, and as the years go on, we see that transportation and communication coming closer and closer together until lately it's indiscernible. And yeah, unprecedented scale where the slightest variations can have an absolute global impact. I think about like Amazon deciding how many packing peanuts to use in their package, and using one more may not seem like a lot, but when there's a billion packages, like yeah, those costs can add up. And just little efficiencies in the transportation grid and the sensors and our infrastructure on the road can kind of reverberate around the world and into people's everyday lives and their commute to work and go into their 9 to 5. So I think like all of that industry in the auto world gives you a lot of insight into developments lately, good and bad. Something I've been tracking a lot that we like to talk about at DIMO is some of the abuse of user consent and harvesting of user data. Our cars are super smart now. They have a million sensors. There's a computer in the dash. And automakers are kind of deciding how to use that data for good and bad. There's been a series of New York Times articles over the last few years, kind of increasing in severity and scariness about automakers having ambiguous consent in that terms of service. We all know you scroll through the terms of service, click next. And they are harvesting that data and giving it to data brokers or insurance companies or entities we don't even know about because it's honestly pretty vague and behind closed doors. The most recent one was GM is banned from selling user data for 5 years. They got a pretty big slap on the wrist there. And that headline scares me, but also like confuses me. So like GM is banned for 5 years. Does that mean like everyone else is still selling data and now GM is just at a disadvantage? How is this even allowed to happen? Like, shouldn't there be guardrails against this? I guess what is your take on the landscape of people getting snooped on as they're driving from point A to point B?
So privacy has always been a concern with every single connected device that we've seen come around over the last 10 years. But the amount of scariness depends on the person and the type of device. When when it happens to your Nest thermostat, I feel like people are more okay with it. But when it happens to your car, it's a little bit different, right? It's something you're paid up to $150,000 for, maybe, right? That's the newer trucks cost up to that much. So it's when you feel like your data is being sold and you're not the owner or the driver of the car that you've paid so much money for, it definitely raises some eyebrows for people. The history of this actually goes back to almost 2012. So right at the very beginning of the IoT boom and the beginnings of connected devices, GM actually almost sold OnStar to Google, and they ended up backing out of it because of some privacy concerns and their thought that was like, I think there might be something valuable here. Then a few years went by, and Accenture released a report that said connected vehicle data is worth a lot of money. However, what this report did not explain very well was that the services built on the data are worth a lot of money, not necessarily the data itself. But unfortunately, big corporations operate in certain ways, and what ended up happening was everybody started believing that yes, this data is worth a lot of money. So the actual consent was hidden in some terms of service that you probably didn't even realize you signed at the dealership as part of the stack of 30 papers to get a loan. And on the other side of it, the engineering team started working on creating these huge data lakes of aggregated data. And at first, it was actually used for good internally, for figuring out, which vehicles are having safety issues, which vehicles are having features that people aren't using, or which features we should prioritize. But fast forward a few years from that, we're now seeing that once you're sitting on a pile of user data that you sort of got consent for, you want to show some revenue from it. So now what we're seeing is this push from the OEMs to try and sell this data. However, obviously it's not going so well because people have a huge pushback against it because they don't remember agreeing to it. And at the end of the day, they don't see how it benefits them. And, in GM's case, it was very much not benefiting them. It was clearly directly used against them without their permission. What I believe truly is actually this is almost the tail end of it, because there's only so many times that people like Jim Farley and Mary Barra can get on a call for Q1 earnings report and once again show that the revenues from the sales of this data are lower than an average startup makes in sales in 6 months. So looking forward, my belief is that a car is a device like any other, just the most complicated one. And the real revenue and the real trillion-dollar opportunity for the automaker is going to come from turning the car into not data platform, but a compute platform, and allowing millions of developers, millions of businesses, existing and new, to start using the car like compute. So everything from, we'll take even some future-looking use cases in, GPU rendering. The average EV sits plugged in all night, and it could be earning money for you by converting videos to stream to Netflix in your neighborhood. The distribution of data updates, the car has enough compute and enough wireless communication to be able to distribute wireless updates to other cars or other sensors on the road or other devices or even to each other. And that's before we even get into user-facing applications that people could be using within the car. I mean, everything from gaming if you have children in your Suburban to, even more, robotaxi looking use cases where maybe when the car is parked, I just click a button and now this car is driving around taking people to work. I'm very excited for the change from data to compute, because I think we saw what that did for Amazon, and being able to program the billions of cars on the road and turn them into basically movable compute with storage, I think is going to revolutionize transportation.
Yeah, definitely shifting the mindset on what a car is. It used to be such a tool to achieve a goal of getting to a destination, and it's rapidly changing into a computational platform of its own. And I hope people start to think about it more as their phone or their computer. And I think we did see that big reckoning of people starting to actually give a crap about their privacy and being like, wait, maybe having Alexa sitting in my living room all day, every day, like isn't the best idea. And to start to take that level of caution and care for their privacy and security with vehicles as well, because we spend so much time in our cars. Our entire civilization is built on cars, and the amount of public space that we've given up to roads, and the amount of time we spend in our commute to go and produce money for our families. I think having it be more of a computational platform is only better. And hey, giving us more free time once autonomous driving comes in as well. It'll be a satellite office, so to speak, of yours. So you definitely know your stuff with cars, which I guess I have more of a fun question for you. I'm curious, what are your top three favorite car brands? And I guess let's ignore anything we just talked about as far as like security and how they treat their users. I'm talking about pure design of the car, the beautiful machine that is the Automotive. What cars do you think are doing it right as far as ergonomics and design goes, and establishing that car culture and some of those like old school 1940s through 60s just vibes of vehicles?
Yeah. I mean, cars are, Well, it's important to remember that the car companies are still very good at making the car themselves, right? And there's a lot of extremely smart people that work there. And the teams that are working on the powertrain of the vehicle and the engine and the transmission and the tuning are spending a lot of time, and they're truly some of the most bright, creative people in the world. My personal favorite, and this is a little bit biased, but I believe in buying local, and I've always loved American cars. So I really like Cadillac as a brand. I don't have an Escalade. I drive a stick shift ATSV, but always love the Cadillac brand, and it certainly stepped down from the being the standard of luxury that it used to be. But I always believe that things are cyclical and come back around. So over time, I think it will come back.
Yeah,
My
and viewers, I have seen Yev's car, and it's a beautiful machine. Even if I'm crammed in the tiny two-seater backseat with a box of conference swag on my lap.
definitely, it's yeah, definitely not a family car, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. All right, number two.
Number two, number two, I'm gonna have to go with Porsche. You know, Porsche has been very consistent with trying to make the best driver's car there's ever been, and always been a big fan of their design, their powertrains, you know, their flat six engines, and the amount of care that they take to tune it to almost perfection, so that you really feel that it works like a Swiss watch when you're driving it. And one day, hopefully, we'll be able to get one myself.
Yeah, the Turbo 911 is always on my short list there, and I also respect their design. They've like stayed true to. You see a Porsche and you know it's a Porsche, whereas I feel like a lot of American automakers the last like 10 and 20 years like keep hard pivoting to the latest trend, and everyone's like, oh, we need to look like a Tesla now. In the last couple of years, quick round off all the corners and make it super sleek, and Porsche has just been like, no, this is Porsche, and has kind of stayed true to those values.
They have auto brands actually spend a lot of time on making sure their car is easily recognizable. Not every single one, but the, let's say, most popular, most well known things like the Mustang, you will always, they make sure that even if you glimpse at it from half a mile away for half a second, that you see those three vertical lines on the back and you know it's a Mustang. Even with the F-150, you know, with a truck, it's a square box at the end of the day, but you can always recognize an F-150 over a, you know, Chevy 1500 or a Ram from a mile away or more. So it's a lot of time and care goes into it, and a lot of design time is spent on making sure that those cars remain true to their brand and to their, you know, to their vision of what they are supposed to be.
Yeah, definitely. Some are super recognizable. I think about like the BMW M series too. Whenever I'm like, that looks like a BMW, but mean and on steroids. Like, oh, it's an M series. It looks like it's ready to roast you off the starting line. Yeah. Speaking of, what's your number three?
Well, obviously, I'm a driver's car kind of guy, and so BMW would be my third, and BMW is the third brand that really prides itself on being the, you know, driver's car. I think we all remember the ads, but they have always been focused on, over everything else, the driver experience and finding that balance between performance while retaining that luxury. And I mean, M series cars have always been phenomenal. There's, you know, sometimes it blows my mind to, you know, you to have a BMW M series sedan be able to compete with, you know, almost a race car on the track, right? And you think about how much engineering went into making this four-person family sedan drive like a sports car, and it's not easy.
Yeah, absolutely. My girlfriend's dad scares me in his M series sometimes, but he knows what he's doing. All right, let's shift back to demo world a little bit. We got so many irons in the fire over here. You know, we're very ambitious project. We got a mobile app. We have the blockchain component. We're also talking to a lot of auto entities and automakers and service providers. There's so many people need to plug in, a lot of integrations, spinning a lot of plates. What does the engineering org look like almost behind the scenes? What are different people working on? What kind of sub teams are there? What kind of like specializations do you have? Developer to developer, a CTO, how do you like to run a ship?
Hmm. So, I started my career at bigger companies like GM, and that was like a 600-person organization. Ford was even bigger. Volkswagen is obviously one of the biggest companies in the world. We're a very small team. At the moment, it's 15 engineers split into four different focus areas. In terms of process, we try to stay light. I've always been a fan of trying to find the best people because less process is required in that case. And they are mostly driven by the vision of DIMO and being able to create something new and better for the world. Getting into locations, one of the, I would say, better things that came out from 2020, 2021 was this kind of change to remote work, right? So we try to hire the best wherever they are. We have people in mainland Europe, we have people in the UK, and we have engineering teams basically all over US. Everything from Nevada to Ohio to Michigan to New York. What we found is this flexibility really allows you to hire the best people wherever they are. And getting down into the details of the teams, it's split into four main groups, and they're focused on onboarding end users in the case of DIMO Mobile to make sure that we are not just a platform with no one using it, as you see a lot in the market today. On the other side, we have a developer onboarding team, and they are 100% focused on bringing new applications, making it easy to onboard a new application, making it easy to build. Third team that we have is looking at, let's say, 3 to 6 months out and creating new features around making it easier to produce a verifiable credential from the data or a zero knowledge proof or enabling some new functionality that somebody once wanted to build with us. The fourth team is focused on integration. So we believe in putting our foot to the metal, to the floor, if you want to think of it that way.
Pedal to the metal, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So the integrations team is focused on bringing new data feeds, new OEM integrations, new device integrations, and creating more data for developers and users to see in their own app, and enabling new use cases that weren't possible before. One thing I'd like to call out is outside of the DIMO mobile product, which is very consumer focused, our engineering leaders are also the product managers. We don't have a separate person who's talking to the developer, or a separate person who's talking to the future looking developer. The engineering leads are the product managers, and they are wearing both hats, which is no easy task. And I'm very proud to have a team of folks who can work that way. But what it really comes down to is really short feedback loops, a lot of ownership. Everyone on the team practices, number one, ownership over the things they create. And for the right kind of person, it's exactly where they want to be. Um, I like to say there is no wrong person, just wrong job for that person. And from my time, working at big companies, there are people who like to be a little bit more organized, who enjoy the process. DIMO is a great place to work if you enjoy very little process because you are too tired of running at bureaucratic walls, and you want there to be no blockers between you and accomplishing your goal. So,
Yeah, and I love the product managers also being developers. I think like bringing those two roles together only makes you more informed when you're building the product. I'll sit here and watch Henry 1 hour be doing a user interview with a DIMO mobile user, and then the next hour be designing our global accounts login, and going straight from someone telling you, I don't know how the hell to use MetaMask, like logging in is a pain, and then immediately being able to write the code that remedies that and improves the user experience. Like, it's a very tight feedback loop. It brings the problems and solutions very close together, and I think that's a great way to configure things.
It is, and being an open source project, being a community driven project, one of the things I love the most is when the engineering leads jump into the community channels to ask for feedback. It's something that I wish more companies could practice because it's usually very difficult when you're an engineer so far removed from the customer to find out what's happening, what their feedback is. But at DIMO, you can just scroll down in Discord to a public channel and ask the user, ask the developer, which one do you like more,
Yeah.
and be able to ship a solution to them within hours instead of weeks or months is truly one of those things that allows us to move faster with a great team.
Yeah, hop in the Discord, ask what SDK do you want to see next, and 10 people are like, Python, Python, please, OMG, Python. And a couple weeks later, Python SDK comes out. It's a very like cause and effect sort of methodology, which I like.
Yeah, and actually, our Python SDK was built by a community member, right? And being an open source project has this benefit where you almost have this extended engineering team, where now we have people showing up who just want to contribute because they are excited about the vision as well, and maybe they have a full time job somewhere else that they can't join full time, but they're able to contribute, they're able to join in and be able to participate in the building of DIMO just as much as anyone else.
Yeah, the guy who finished up the Home Assistant integration, he's just like a huge open source IoT nut, really uses Home Assistant for a lot around his household and hates the whole like Alexa Siri situation and was like, I love Demo, I love Home Assistant, let me make them one. And that's been a really cool integration to see. And a lot of people are minting dev licenses because they want to tinker around with the Home Assistant integration and
Mhm.
see how what's possible with it.
Definitely, definitely.
So yeah, it's pretty obvious that self-driving cars are here to stay, and not only here to stay, but things are gravitating towards that way. Everyone says, in 100 years, no one will be driving their own car. I'd love to get your thoughts on not only the state of self-driving cars and autonomous vehicles, but also some of the problems with them. And it seems like there's a couple different initiatives. Tesla's kind of doing their own thing in their own silo. There's some other projects. Google has Waymo, and why are like those cars driving around with basically Optimus Prime transformer strapped to the roof and a million cameras when like Tesla can look like a normal sports car? And where is the technology going, and what's the state of it right
Hmm. It's a that's a great question, Joe. So I actually spent some time working with Argo AI and saw some of the problems from the inside of what the self-driving car space has to deal with. And the problems are, let's say, many. Um, the first one, I think you actually called it out, is everyone's kind of trying to do it in a silo, but unfortunately, the road is a shared space. And imagine driving a road where everybody is only thinking about themselves and not looking at any other cars. Wouldn't work out so well. So one thing I'd like to, I want to point out is Google has made the most progress, but the reason for that is really simple. For them, success in self-driving is not even tied to a product. They're more than happy to have the Google brand driving on the streets and have it just be marketing. But they do have the most expensive car. It's used to be over $500,000 per car, now coming down maybe to 350K with LiDAR and radar and having it pointed in every possible direction. And obviously, 350K car is going to be inaccessible to almost everybody, right? And the other thing that people don't see is in the morning when this car just starts up, you have to have a PhD calibrate it every single morning and make sure that all the sensors are aligned because one sensor being off is going to cause it to malfunction. So that's definitely not going to scale, right? Now, the second part of this is once it's even on the road, you need basically a call center, an FAA, to manage and watch all of these self-driving vehicles. And that's what happens when every single time it gets pulled over by a police officer or gets into an accident, is you end up basically talking to the call center. And one of the things that a lot of people don't know is when those cars are not sure, they actually have somebody with an Xbox controller that helps the car get out of a tricky situation, and that's hidden a lot of the time from the public's view.
Ooh, I
But
want that
this,
job. It's like those Amazon Fresh, like just walk out with your item stores, where it was actually like a warehouse in India that they were like feverishly scanning all the cameras and tallying them up.
that's that's the unfortunate truth about it. And that's definitely going to prevent it from scaling, right? And there's also this big outstanding question, if you look at the warehouse market over the last 4 or 5 years, they've created an environment where the robots are actually rather dumb, but the infrastructure in the factory itself or the warehouse has all the sensors, which begs the question, are we investing in the right places? So you can either have 500 Waymo cars, each costing $500,000, or you could, and by the way, they only operate on certain blocks and certain roads that they can operate on, right? Or do you spend that money on upgrading the stoplights and the light poles to provide this data to the cars? In which case, now, if you upgrade a road and those vehicles are able to communicate with the road, you now need, I mean, this car could essentially be blind, right? It doesn't need any sensors at all if it can leverage the infrastructure sensors to see where it's going. So when you get to, as you think about the billion cars on American roads and even more elsewhere, which is the more efficient way to do this? Is it making every car have 50 lidar sensors and radar sensors and the call center, or is it creating a more controlled environment where the environment itself is providing the data to the car, and immediately now you can have a much cheaper vehicle uh, that is able to communicate with the road? But that's just one thought on the topic. The other one is, I think it's an intermediate set of steps to get there, and it comes back to we share the road. So today, there's still almost non-existent vehicle-to-vehicle communication. And I think that's an intermediate step to upgrading the infrastructure that would allow, a Waymo car to send data to a Ford vehicle for even, I can't see around the corner, but you can, right? And all of this data is very easily shared between robots and machine systems, right? Humans do this as well, but in their own strange way, through vibes and hand signals. But looking forward, the vehicle to vehicle and vehicle to infrastructure, which is kind of the next step, or maybe it could be done at the same time, are very, very critical. Now, coming back to, let's say, the Tesla model, right? It's definitely not as trustworthy, I would say, having been in one myself, in terms of environments they can operate in, and the level of confidence is lower. But they are doing it with just some basic cameras and machine learning. And to be fair, they've probably made it, 90% of the way. Unfortunately, though, 90% of the way is not necessarily good enough to handle all cases. So if living in Michigan, or even just north of where snow starts and half the year is cold, I've yet to see any kind of a deployment at scale where it snows and rains very often, right? So even today, Waymo is really only able to operate in places that are sunny more than half the year. And it begs the question, when I'm driving in the winter through New York or Michigan, there is no lanes, right? They're made up.
Sometimes
How
there's
are
not
we
even
gonna?
a road. Like some of these back alleys in Brooklyn that have like semis jetting half out from driveways and someone with a shopping cart running through the middle of this road. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's humans, it turns out, actually pretty good at handling these variety of complex situations. But if you want to truly get to that full autonomy, we're definitely ways away, especially in a global sense. Uh, that being said, I think Tesla Vision is honestly probably more practical from a cost perspective, because at the very least they've gotten to 90% on most of their vehicles, as opposed to what Waymo's trying to do, which is, we're going to run this test fleet and it doesn't actually need to make us money. We're happy, for the R&D and the patents we get to file, and advancing our other AI projects.
Interesting. Yeah, I never thought about it that way. And I also never considered, investing versus the car versus like the infrastructure in the road and It reminds me of like a steam engine on a train powering the train versus like the third rail in the MTA New York subway system is the power and what makes the thing work coming from an external source or an internal source, and what's the most efficient versus what's the most scalable.
Mhm.
Interesting. Okay, to bring it back to DIMO a bit, just want to talk about the DIMO user experience. We have a really ambitious mission, and the auto industry is one of the largest and omnipresent industries today. When you look around your everyday life, it's sometimes not the sexiest thing to talk about a digital twin for your car or an open marketplace of service providers and kind of like the high level pillars of what we believe in. But it makes kind of more tangible sense to the everyday user when you talk about individual use cases that DIMO can enable. And in your opinion, what are some of the craziest or innovative or mind-blowing use cases that DIMO or a decentralized mobility network could enable in the future?
That's that's an interesting one. So, I mean, the first one, just coming back to the last question, is around the V2V and V2X. There's a lot of security concerns when you start having a vehicle provide data to another vehicle, or infrastructure provide data to another vehicle, and having ability to verify that data without having it be a privacy concern certainly leads us down the path towards ZK proofs, which is where DIMO is going to eventually go. And we want to be that underlying layer that allows one car to look up on a public ledger, is this data to be trusted, right? This proof was signed by this public key. Who does the public key belong to? Well, it belongs to this vehicle made by this car brand, that has a license to operate in this specific region, the state, and the car is registered, so it's allowed to be on the road. So I should be able to trust this information. And you know, maybe you can even enable kind of a gamification or incentive model for these autonomous robots on the road, where now they can actually pay each other and grade each other's data. You know, any they, my family spent a long time in manufacturing, and there's a certain truth with automation. It works great up until the moment of first service, meaning it's installed, everything is beautiful, but the moment that it gets an oil spill near it, or it gets dusty, or a cat gets into the building, that sensor starts becoming a lot less reliable. So thinking into the future, a hailstorm went by and there's a little ding on this camera now. And so now it thinks that, there's permanently a vehicle stuck in its, 3 o'clock. And so it comes back to enabling this trusted transportation and trusted verification using privacy via ZK proofs. That's, in my mind, the ultimate end state of DIMO and where we want to go. But that's not the only use case. Right before that, I like to think of the robo-taxi use case, right? Uber did an amazing thing, which is allow anyone to use just one app to request a ride anywhere globally without having to worry about anything really. At the same time, there's an underlying layer of infrastructure there, which is basically a live bidding system for ride requests and drivers who are willing to service it. I Having built one of these before and worked with Uber before, I can tell you that a blockchain is very good at live bidding. Uniswap has demonstrated that. And using a public ledger to have users basically post rides or even delivery requests, and having a vehicle that's autonomous be able to bid based on the conditions set by its owner to service those rides. And now you've turned this vehicle into a money-making asset. You're enabling ride hail to operate not with huge fees taken by Uber, but basically minimal fees taken by a smart contract, and having it all be powered with verifiable data. the, there's things that people don't necessarily know, but Uber, because their data source is a phone, frequently actually gets gamed and taken advantage of in South America and in other markets, because at the end of the day, it's very easy to fake a phone's location. And there's no other verification of this information besides, two phones. So using DIMO data, which is always cryptographically signed, the source of the data can always be traced, It's verified against the cell tower data. We can actually solve some of these really tough challenges that no one has found a solution for.
Yeah, I remember during the Pokemon Go craze, people like spoofing their location to go and catch a Charizard in Taiwan or something. Like gaming with phones is most certainly an attainable thing.
Definitely. And those are more future-looking use cases. Some of them are not that far away. Some of them require what I like to call social consensus, right? From people to want to migrate to them. But then there's also just things we want to solve for drivers today, right? DIMO is live today in 160,000 cars. We have like 70,000 drivers. We want to bring this functionality. We want to bring DIMO to the mass market. So we're working on basic things that regular people care about, like insurance. Today, pay-per-mile insurance is a privacy nightmare and usually requires a dongle from your insurance company to be installed in your car. And God knows what they do with that in this single-purpose device that only serves them, right? Um, Another problem, charging, right? If you buy an EV, the next day you're like, where do I go charge? And even with all the government incentives and all the charging infrastructure we're building, it's still not quite enough. People still don't feel confident in buying an EV. Imagine if we use the demo functionality of building a digital twin to allow anyone to share their own charger, right? To allow gas stations to install cheaper chargers that they can, share with drivers that can book it. This would immediately take us from, millions of chargers available to 10x that, right?
Yeah.
And allow us to reach mass scale EV adoption much faster.
Yeah, that the Airbnb for EV chargers is definitely an interesting idea when I've heard of the long lines at superchargers. My friend who lives in LA after the LA wildfires, the people needing their car more than ever, to get to a loved one or get the heck out of an at-risk area. The lines at superchargers were like 100 people long. They were standing there for hours and hours. Love all of those use cases. I think like the B2B ones are the most interesting to me just because it blows my mind that there's no B2B on the road right now, like how smart they are. And I think my favorite interaction while driving is when someone flashes their high beams at you and there's like a deer on the road coming up. It's just like the most heartwarming human thing ever. But like, can't always trust a human, I want the verifiable ping sent to my car that says a deer was detected in the LiDAR, like zero point
Mhm.
0.7
Mhm.
miles ahead, reduce speed to this to reduce,
Mhm.
yeah. And I would point out Rob, our other co-founder, Rob Solomon's presentation at EthDenver last year was pretty cool, showing everyone talks about like the DeFi money Legos in blockchain and in crypto, and applying that to being a car owner where you're getting decentralized insurance that's data driven from the data that you've given them. And what if you want to sell your car on a decentralized marketplace where it just automatically populates your entire driving history, vehicle health, service record, and everything, calculates a price, trustlessly matches you with a buyer, transfers the deed, the NFT deed. There's like, I could go on forever. There's so many components that could be plugged in using like decentralized technologies. Um, and then my little fun pet one that I always say is like, I love the gamification and the social aspect of things. I just want like a game to visit every museum in your city, or a leaderboard of who has the crappiest car based on like how old it is, how beat up it is, how many times it's broken down. Yeah, opportunities are really endless, and looking forward to seeing what devs build in the coming months and years.
Definitely. There's actually a fun one on that side. I I very much enjoy driving, and if you go through the Swiss Alps, you can actually collect these little badges for visiting all the peaks and all the mountain passes. And I would love to turn this into something digital where I actually have my driving data, right? And now it's this immutable record that I can share with other drivers or even just keep myself for memory that has, this moment in time uh, that I really enjoyed, right? Almost like AAA used to have something called a triptych, back in the like 70s, 80s, you could show up to your AAA office and tell them where you're going, and they would give you this little booklet with directions and all the things you can do and visit and coupons. And I would love to, you could keep that after, after the trip, and it was like a little memory of what you did. It would be great to have something like that, and it might be coming to Demo soon.
Ooh, yeah, I love flipping through my passport and being like looking at all the cool immigration stamps. Like, oh, I remember that trip so fondly. And yeah, badges. We might have done a little experiment on Demo already with badges, but more to come there.
Mhm.
Speaking of the Demo mobile app, 2025 is really shaping up to be big. The end of 2024 with the implementation of global accounts, it was just like a huge paradigm shift for Demo and streamlining
Indeed.
onboarding and login and how other projects can come in and integrate. And where that was a lot of like under the hood stuff, infrastructure stuff, behind the scenes a little bit, maybe not the most exciting for the end user. What's coming down the pipeline is a lot more user facing directly in the app,
Mhm.
fun stuff you can play around with.
Mhm.
Are widgets and staking. Want to take a moment to kind of give us a sneak peek of each of
Mhm.
those and what they mean for Demo drivers?
Yeah, so there's going to be some reworked widgets and new widgets coming to the Demo mobile app. People like getting more insights on their driving, getting more information, right? People love their Whoop and their Apple Watch. So you're going to see a refresh on a lot. Well, me too.
Oh.
We
Yeah, our
are.
other co-founder Alex just got a Whoop, and we've been comparing our app and their app a lot because they have great
Mhm.
insights and monthly reports and stuff
Mhm.
like that.
Definitely, definitely. So you're going to see a lot more of that coming to Demo, right? And on the, let's say, more Web3 side, we're going to have staking in the mobile app soon. So as part of the gamification, people are constantly always asking us, what can I do to increase my car's level to earn more? And you're going to be able to actually stake Demo in order to increase your car's level. On one side, it's signaling, your alignment for the project, and on the other side, you'll get to increase the level of your car and earn more that way.
Nice. It's cyclical. Stake more to earn more, and I know people have been hungry for more opportunities to earn more. And, even getting like an LTE R1 and getting to the highest streak level,
Mm.
level four, and they just like want to bump
Mm.
that up even more. So exciting to hear that will kind of be a new avenue to take.
Definitely. There's one more actually that's I'm pretty excited about. We've partnered with a company that's been in the auto space for a long time, and they're actually gonna be bringing a AR VR tire scanning to the mobile app. So you're going to be able to digitize your tire and um, also get insights on your tire health, which is going to allow you to then sell your car for more money or find an upgrade for your car. And this will all be possible to be fed into the AI agent coming later this year.
Awesome. Yeah, take a 3D scan of that, let you know when it's time to rotate, when it's time to replace, or maybe time to put those studs or winter tires on. I like that a lot. Uh, cool. What else we got? I mean, we love getting out in the world and evangelizing Demo's mission to people in the meat space. And coming up at the end of February, we're going to be attending, I think, our third EthDenver, unless you guys snuck one in there a long time ago that I'm unaware of. And it's a chance to just connect directly. Yeah, I think it might be four, with fans of the project, fans of Web3, and a community that really appreciates the decentralized aspect of Demo. And conversely, in January, we went to CES, and that was mind blowing for me. I'm very used to like crypto conferences and seeing what a normal mainstream conference and probably the biggest technology conference of the year in Las Vegas. Totally focused on the automotive industry and connected car services, totally different demographic of people. Want to talk a bit about how we approach to different events like that and kind of our message to different types of attendees and demographics and what they care about.
Mhm. That's so the way I like to think about it is, well, the Web3 space is still earlier on. It is I would still argue mostly early tech adopters, right? And early tech adopters I would say prioritize, vision and some functionality, but they want to be early and they want the next greatest thing, even though even if though it doesn't work exactly the way everyone wants it to, but they want to be early and they want to reap the benefits of being early. They want to be that friend in the group who's telling everybody about the next thing. Um, so that's on on the Web3 side. But at the auto conferences, right? It's a lot of people who have been working at the same company for 10, 20, 30 years, and that company has been around for 100 years or more. So the messaging to them is very, very different, right? They care about blunt, tangible value today that can be brought into their vehicle or into their ecosystem within a very short time frame. So for them, and this is why we're so focused on user adoption and real growth as opposed to just focusing on only let's say vision, is for them, going even just from my first CES at DIMO to this one, right? There's such a stark difference in telling somebody you're building a new kind of connected vehicle ecosystem with 5,000 cars on it to 160,000 cars on it, right? To them, that's real validation. Showing them a real application or three that a outside developer has built using our SDK to them is tangible value that they're like, okay, this makes sense. And in some ways, it's actually almost a little bit easier to convince them because if you have the tangible value and you can explain it, it's almost like a check yes, right? From my time in the auto space, GM, Ford, everyone else, nobody wanted to put in Apple CarPlay or Android Auto in the car, but they are mass market companies and they sell to the mass market. So if everyone got an iPhone and Android, that's the next thing they're putting in the car, and that's the thing they're going to prioritize. If Demo can show that it is adopted by mass market of people, and we can get to a million cars, to them it's almost like a no-brainer to say, yeah, we're going to be integrating tomorrow, not a problem. Sounds like our logical next step. I don't need it. I don't need too much convincing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I found it extremely enlightening to see how to kind of change my messaging and what I was saying to attendees across a booth at each of the conferences. And at EthDenver, you can say you're the digital identity for your car, you can NFT of your car. And they're like, wow, that's so cool. I want that. If you said that to someone at CES, they would, excuse me, what is an NFT? But talking to people at CES and being like, we got 160,000 cars connected. We just got this new EV marketplace partner that you can, in a couple clicks, get carbon credit kickback for your charging history. That is like a tangible value added to users at scale right there. And that kind of helps them grok what we're all about and our mission and what an open marketplace could look like, because that's kind of unprecedented in the auto space. So it's hard to wrap your mind around sometimes. Cool. Looking forward to
Definitely.
spending a couple days in Denver with you. We got something special planned there. I don't want to tease too much, but keep your eye out on the road for Demo logo zipping around Colorado in a few weeks. So since the Model T, Henry Ford's first foray into the automotive world, cars have been laid out the same way. You got 4 seats, or those funny ones that have like 3 seats in the front row, or it's like whole family cruising somewhere. They're facing forward. Everything has been pretty standard since the dawn of time. However, removing that forward-facing necessity due to autonomous driving is going to be like a complete shift and impact the configuration of the vehicle. Everyone remembers Minority Report, one of my favorite movies as a kid, where the cars are just going every which way, and it's kind of set up like a meeting room instead of a car. And even like the Tesla Robo Taxi, or I forget what the bus is called, the Robo Bus or something. Those look extremely different than vehicles on the road today. So, do you have any ideas about what may change in cars, design wise or component wise, and what cars may look like in 10 or 50 years?
Yeah. I think the first thing to call is, I mean, a lot of, even in Minority Report, also one of my favorite movies, even in that movie, there's still some cars that are regular four-wheeled cars, right? that you
Yep.
can take outside the city. But it's definitely going to change for inner city, like inside the city. And, in the world of Minority Report, you definitely have smart infrastructure, right? And the car is basically a pod that is, going from A to B, and it allows you to completely change what the car is and what it means, it can become more like a train, it can become more like a bicycle, it can become really anything you want it to. Um, I think the concept cars from the existing automakers have done a pretty good job of actually illustrating that in the steering wheel goes away. You can now maybe sleep in it, recline in it, right? Maybe you're playing games in it. But in a lot of ways, it's going to look like you're have your own personal driver, and that means you can sleep or work or do whatever it is that you want to. I'm certainly expecting it to look more like a living room and less like a airplane.
Yeah, definitely. And uh, interesting you mentioned like the infrastructure because that will change too. I had no idea when we were in Las Vegas for CES that there was an underground Tesla loop or something. Like you guys showed up one day and we're like, we took the Tesla loop. There definitely could be like private roadways for only autonomous vehicles, and it almost reminds me of like the congestion pricing in Manhattan. It's like if you want to come into this region, you need to have an autonomous vehicle, or is there something we might just see zoning like that in the future?
I think we will, and I think it would probably, it's interesting. A lot of cities are considering now removing the roads and making more walkable areas, right? And I think the to have better cities without more lanes and more traffic, it's going to be a mix of congestion pricing, removing some roads, and then changing how much space an efficient transportation network can take. Because at the end of the day, the fastest way to get around New York is the subway, and the subway handles far more people than the road does on a given day. And I would argue it's a way better experience for everyone involved, as opposed to sitting in your car by yourself. And it's a huge SUV Suburban, and you're
Yeah.
sitting next to a bunch of other people who are also the only person in their car.
Yep, yep, and you just see big Escalades rolling down Fifth Ave every day just to come
Huh?
in to work for a couple hours.
Yes, and well, and mostly you're just sitting in traffic though.
True, and almost hitting me on my skateboard as I zip between them.
Huh?
Cool. Got a couple more questions for you here, and then we'll wrap up. I do want to mention the DIMO developer license because it's been like a huge
Mhm.
development for our ecosystem the last couple months of giving any third-party developer the ability to gain access to the DIMO APIs, the wealth of vehicle data, to build an app. And it's totally self-service, decentralized, managed by a smart contract. I can look on chain and see right now how many have been minted. I think it's like at 178 or something. Why is this such a critical component of an open ecosystem, and how does it differ from the legacy way of doing things? We've heard so many horror stories about apps getting pulled from the Apple App
Mhm.
Store or certain devs getting blacklisted. And why is the open self-service
Mhm.
avenue the way to go?
So, as I think, as you pointed out, most systems today, even Alchemy or, Web3 tools, they all have API keys. And unfortunately, those API keys are usually cryptographic, but they're only usable in one spot. So, as part of our move to global accounts and moving the users to an AA account, we also moved the developers to what is essentially an AA account. So, the DIMO developer license is a smart contract. And instead of holding, EOAs for signing on and controlling that A account, it has API keys. But what this does is just like on the user side, it enables the user to manage their account any way they want without a third party controlling it. It allows the developer to deploy the smart contract that they can use with Demo. And I mean, I hope they even use it with other systems, right? And the self-service part that we built on top really just helps you deploy that smart contract so that you don't even have to know that it is one, and all you see is a your key, which happens to be a Ethereum private key, but it it's that's honestly not an important detail. Um, what is important here is that we've made it enables a developer ecosystem that's permissionless and one where a single entity can't remove your access because it's your account at the end of day.
And that's it. That's the secret sauce. I think the auto industry has been notoriously gated, and especially once connected car services came about, of getting in the Tesla app store, or I
Mm.
mean, some of these other automakers don't even have an app store because they don't want anyone else building stuff for their infotainment system. So having it be open and self-service you don't realize what a big
Mm.
paradigm shift that is until you start seeing hundreds of apps pop up on DIMO that you can just log into with a couple
Mm.
clicks and use with your portable vehicle data little knapsack that you got with you.
Yeah, Joe, actually, just a quick sidebar on that. Um, I've been thinking a lot about, the OEM side of this and having been on the other side of this. The problem that they see is they're not able to do consent management for, what could be an unlimited number of developers. Because the way they think about it is I am in charge of the consent. The other thing that using the DIMO developer license and the smart account system allows you to do is now you can actually create consent between a user and a developer on an open ledger. And this consent is given by the user without this third party having to approve it, right? Which, from the car maker side, removes the liability that they see as the problem, right? Because a lot of the time, people come after big companies, even when they've done nothing wrong. So there is an incentive to keep everything so gated. But being able to explain how this new paradigm is even more secure than the existing one, removes the liability from the automaker to be able to user sharing data with a bad app, and I hope will give them the trust and the security that they need in order to join the DIMO ecosystem in a bigger way.
Yeah, I mean, every time I use an app with my DIMO account, you select which vehicle you want to share, and you as the user are making that selection. And then I go to my vehicle, and it has a list of all of the apps that I have shared my information with and can easily revoke or add. An important kind of principle to what we're building. Okay,
Definitely.
one more little fun question for you. Just the horror stories of paywalled features on cars. I think the big one last year was BMW making their heated seats paywalled. You know, the coils are in the seat, they're there, ready to turn on, but unless you pay X, I think it was like $12 a month or something. And they eventually walked back on that because the public outcry was so outrageous. But is that the worst thing in the world? You know, I think about like games. I'm a gamer.
Mhm.
Games that are free to play, but then if you want skins or you want the battle pass, you're paying extra. But in that case, the core game is there. Like you need to be able to use your vehicle if you paid a base price for it. What's your take on this insanity?
Mhm. Yeah, this is a fun question. I mean, I personally am against it, right? And the reason is in BMW's case, it's not a cheap car, right? It's an expensive car for most people out there. So if you're paying already, upwards of 50, 60, $70,000, and then you're asked to pay for a subscription, that's very different than the game is free and you can buy upgrades model. So I have a feeling if BMW launched that same idea, but hey, the car is free. And the heated seats feature will work as long as you don't abuse the battery, in which case, you start losing features because you're a bad driver and that's something you opt into. That would be something I think people would be much more open to, right? Kind of this dynamic ownership model where maybe I not even leasing the car, it's like a pay per use model. At that point, I think it would make a lot of sense, but convincing people that they spent $80,000 and the coil's already in it and now they need to pay is, I don't think, going to land well with anybody. Um, a car is the second biggest asset people purchase after their house, wherever you are in the world, right? And you're go- there's no way around it unless you make the car free. Subscriptions are not going to land with people.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same camp. It's like those decisions are made when you are buying the car, and I used to do it so much as a kid. Just go to like the online ordering page on OEM's website, and you get to pick what color you want, and matte or glossy. And yes, there you can select if you would like the heated seats or not, when it is transparent about how much it costs and what is included.
Mhm.
But I think the shock and awe of people buying a car and then realizing afterwards that there were all of these nice to have and quality of life features that they assumed would be included, and are now an additional fee. When being a car owner is already expensive today with insurance and maintenance and
Mhm.
repairs and all that stuff. I think bringing the price down on a vehicle to the base price is pretty critical for planning an investment, which a car is an investment. And I'm glad you said it's people's second most expensive valuable asset a lot of the times, especially if you have a newer car like a Tesla or
Mhm.
another EV or uh, something with full self-driving. The price can get up there.
Definitely.
Cool, yeah. Thanks so much for chatting with me today. Going really around the horn on all sorts of stuff. What's cooking in demo land? What's going on in the greater automotive space and in the crypto world? And we'll have to do this again sometime when some 2025 news has broken. But until then, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Joe.